Yeah,
Very cool. Gotta love that.
absolutely. And Drew, I couldn't help but notice just how snappy your memory was.
I have one thing to say about that. I'm back on the Magic Mind.
There we
So,
go.
drinking the Magic Mind, a little mental performance shot, if you will, um, gets me going. After I've had my coffee, not to my coffee, I supplement my coffee. I don't replace my coffee with it, but it kind of extends that caffeine buzz that I have, where you don't kind of hit that fall off the cliff thing, at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, or, after your caffeine wears off, and it
Absolutely.
keeps me going. It keeps me going. It's good stuff, man, and lots of great stuff in it. Got a little matcha in there.
Yeah, matcha's the
Derived
big
from some,
thing. I
yeah,
used to not
yeah,
like matcha. I
excellent.
used to think it was a little too earthy. Like, oh, what are we doing? Just eating grass? But I have gotten a little bit addicted to the taste of matcha with this. And they use some of the best
Uh-huh.
matcha in this. Used to work next to the Starbucks. And they all had their weird matcha drinks. I always thought they were kind of dumb and odd, but this is pretty pretty tasty.
Yeah, yeah. I don't particularly understand how it works. I just know it
Yeah,
does. It like got time released mental performance boosters in there that it comes from some of these mushrooms that are organically grown in California, and it's good stuff, man. And they even like up the like not only are they supplying all this to you and you get to try it, but you get to try it risk free. So you get to try it, and 100 days later, if you're like, you know what, that wasn't for me, up to 100 days later, you can just get a refund, 100% refund. So, I mean, what's not to love about a little Magic Mind? And
absolutely.
because of your partners here at Comics for Fun and Profit, we can get you 48% off a subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase with the code COMICS at checkout, COMICS, comics. And you can claim that at magicmind.com/comicsfun. So magicmind.com/comicsfun, COMICSFUN. Tell them Drew and Kyle sent you and get yourself 48% off of that first subscription. Try Magic Mind mental performance shots, and you'll be glad you did.
Absolutely.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing the creative team, MK Reed and Jonathan Hill. They are here to promote their new Comixology series, Budding Crisis. Now, the first issue is available digitally on Comixology Unlimited. Issue 2 comes out on February 18th. MK and Jonathan, welcome to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are both of you guys doing today?
We're doing great. It's bright and early. Happy New Year! It's Lunar New Year too.
Yeah, that's
when
right.
we're recording
Yes.
this, so Happy Year of the Snake for everybody. Yep.
Yes. MK, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Oh, thank you very much. All right. So listeners, I'm just going to briefly go over some of their past works. Now, MK is an Eisner Award nominated writer of Dinosaur, Fossils, and Feathers. That's from first, second graphic novels. They have also written The Cast-Off by Lion Forge Roar that was co-written with Brian Smith. Now, Jonathan has worked on the following: Tales of the 7th Grade Lizard Boy. Now, this book has been featured on several honorable book lists, such as the 2024-2025 Oregon Battle of the Books Starters List title. The follow-up sequel to this book, Lizard Boy 2, The Most Perfect Summer Ever, will be coming out this year on April 8th. And also, MK and Jonathan have worked together on a couple books. One of their books that they've they've worked together on is Wild Weather, Storms, Meteorology, and Climate. Now, that won the 2022 Louis J. Batten Author Award K through 12. And also, they've also written another book. Their first book that they worked on was back in 2011, Americus. Now, that won the 2012 Karia Cohen Free Speech Award. Did I get that correct? I hope I got some of those informations correct. Did I miss anything? Do you guys want to add anything to that?
I think just because it was named, it's the Carla Cohen Free Speech Award. It's named after the, oh, I just had it in my head and I lost it. The bookstore in Politics and Prose in Washington D.C. And when I met the people who work there, they were like, she was just a spitfire and just so into politics and cared about it so much. I'm like, feel like I have to correct it now.
That is so nice. That is so cool.
Mhm.
Jonathan, I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything? Did I miss anything? Or you want any of our listeners to check out any of your guys' other works?
Oh no, I mean I think so. I also did a book, Odessa. I think it's out of print at this point, even though it only came out in 2022. But that is also, I don't know, that's probably available in your library. I don't know if you can buy it anymore. But yeah, that's another one worth checking out.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. All right. Now, before we start the interview, I just want to give a big shout out to Dustin Holland of Superfan Promotion. Dustin, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes in setting up this interview and providing me an advanced copy. MK, Jonathan, do you guys want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Dustin.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And also, I just wanted to let listeners know I did get some information before I did some research before this interview. I got some of my information from the fan base press article. A friend of the podcast, Barbara Dillon, interviewed MK and Jonathan. So listeners, if you guys get a chance, please check out the fan base press article. Fanbase interviews MK Reed and Jonathan Hill on the launch of the horticulture fantasy series Budding Crisis with Comixology Originals. Now, that article is dated on January 27th. All right. Jonathan, I'm going to start off with you first, and then MK, jump in. Where can listeners follow you on social media?
At So I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky at one of the Johns, which there's not an H in my name, John, but it's ON, one of the JOHNS.
Hmm?
But I feel like I'm going to be quitting social media anytime soon. So maybe just go to my website, oneofthejohns.com.
Okay. MK?
Similarly, I am on Instagram and Blue Sky at MK Reed. But both of those are linked from my static website, mkreed.com.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Budding Crisis. MK, I'm going to start off with you, and Jonathan, just jump in. What is the story about?
It is about a world where magic comes from a plant that grants wishes. And it's been in the world for a long time, but it's gone extinct in the wild and is slowly dying out. And it kind of picks up at the point where the one place that's been left that has been trying to grow it for centuries has just decided that it's no longer really viable to keep growing enough and repopulating it, so it's kind of just running out, and the rest of the world just sort of reacts to that in various ways, and I've been trying to do sort of a different focus of that on each issue in the series and how people run with it. So that's my early morning answer.
No, look. But okay, yes, it's a very good premise. Jonathan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, MK being the writer, I mean, it's a very collaborative project, but I think one of the things that's most exciting about it is that it's an anthology series, and so we get to kind of hop to, so you've read the first issue, but the second issue will kind of focus on some different characters, and the third issue will focus on some different characters, and I'm working on the fourth one right now. And so I just love the premise of that. I mean, I love anthologies, and I love sort of self anthologies, and I know that
Hmm.
MK originally envisioned this working, having a different person maybe with each issue, but I'm happy that I get to draw the different stories, and I think it's a lot of fun to jump around and to see how this premise sort of seeps into um, the lives of like things on a grand scale, but then
Hmm.
on the sort of like smaller, more like human scale. So
Oh, that sounds very good. All right, so Jonathan, I'm going to ask you this, and MK just jump in, or I'm going to ask you this, and actually it's probably more MJ, but I'm going to start with you, Jonathan. Like, did MK tell you like how they came up with this story? You know, because because MK, like you just said, it's like um the wish, if I remember correctly, if it's called the wish seed, it's slowly dying out, and it's a great premise. So how did you guys come up with the story and the ideas?
well, I MK should take point on that because they're the writer, and then I can pick
Yes.
up when it's appropriate, for me to sort of like pick up, because like again, I think the world building is both of us, but I think the seed, if you were, started
Yes.
with MK.
I started thinking about it in 2019. Just on I was driving somewhere with friends, and it was just basically impossible for me to hear them in the front seat over the noise of the engine where we were driving, and I just kind of was like looking out the window and daydreaming, and it just sort of like came to me there, and then 2020 happened, and
Hmm.
2021 happened, and it became a little bit less fun to think about for a while. But it just sort of thinking about when resources run out,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
what happens then, but also not wanting to go in a totally bleak direction with that,
Hmm.
because things like that do happen all the time, and like people as a society just keep moving. It's just maybe the end of one type of situation or civil structure, and I'll move on to another one.
That's no, because I'm kind of, because it's like the more you talk, more you and Jonathan talk about it. I mean, we're only like 10 minutes into this interview, and already it's what I love so far is, MK, you're right, because in some weird sense, I'm going to say it's almost like in cycle. Like you said, there's certain resources that were has been around all, because eventually things are some stuff are going to eventually die out, but then there's also some other things or some crops, are going to still, there's going to be some that's going to be sustainable, still some will still continue to grow. There's certain crops that will probably die out because of, you know whatever, it's either been harvested too much, or weather changes and stuff like that. But I also love it where you said that you didn't want this to turn into a bleak story. It's just one thing, it's one plant that just kind of is dying out basically, but yet the nation of and correct me if I'm Sinus, the island nation, their civilization is still going on. It's still strong. It's not like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Oh,
Yeah.
um, but like I said, it that's such a great idea that you didn't want to turn it to bleak. You didn't want to make it bleak. You know, I
I
just
think
love.
also part of going through 2020 was, when you go to the grocery store, I think there was some point when just like lemons were not available for a couple months, or
Yes.
um that would happen, and then like a couple months later, the heat wave that year, or maybe the next year, I think just snuck up on the Pacific Northwest, and there was a bunch of news stories about, I think it was potatoes that were just like got uh just cooked inside of the silos that they keep them in, and
Hmm.
just stuff like that keeping on happening. And then also, we wrote the kids weather book together. So like, well, we know how these cycles work.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's not the best sign.
Um, I've already like MK. You already mentioned about a little bit. You touched on about civilization or the society in the book. Um, I've already mentioned about hopefully I'm pronouncing the name correctly of the nation, Sinus. Um,
It's
Jonathan,
actually Cygnus, I think.
Cygnus. Okay, Cygnus.
Yeah, yeah.
So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you. So like, uh, when MK told you about this story, did you guys already start planning on how is the civilization going to look? What's our quote unquote Bible and world for the world building?
Yeah, I think that is somewhere where I think, something I really love is, I mean, we've worked together for a long time. Like you
Hmm.
mentioned before in the interview, Americas came out in 2011. And, um, I'll often look at that book and I'll tell people that you can kind of see, as you read it, if you kind of are paying attention, you can kind of see us learning how to work with each other.
Hmm.
Um, and what's nice is, I mean, at this point, we've worked together so much that I think there's a lot of trust. And I think we both still have, our egos a little bit, but I think that's still like that's also a sign of a good relationship when you can like have take that feedback and really like collaborate. And I think
Hmm.
one of the joys I have of this is that it is a real true collaboration between us. And I want to make sure I mention our colorist too, because I think she
Yes.
has a big part in like forging this. But I think, so MK had some briefs of like, okay, here's some ideas that I was thinking. Um, but then I know that they're very like trusting of me and being like, what direction you run with it is going to be, like they'll look at it and they'll get feedback, but there's a trust there. And so I think a big thing for me, and I love the way MK put it once in an email, was like, I really don't like, I feel like Ren Fair fantasy. I love that MK called it that, like, is
Hmm.
so prominent. Like, and I mean, it's basically just like Eurocentric,
Yes.
Tolkien-esque. And I love Lord of the Rings, but it's just like I'm sick of seeing white people and elves and dwarves and in European armor and these European castles. And so I think for me, I was like, okay, well, let's look at how can I make this, you know, where can I inject something a little bit different into that? And so
Yeah.
like I actually spent high school in the Middle East, and so I got to spend a lot of time traveling in the Middle East and the
Hmm.
Mediterranean.
Yes.
And I've always have a love and affinity for that design and that architecture.
Hmm.
And, I think something else I was thinking about when I was thinking of Cygnus was just sort of that, like, I also, I've always had this love for like ancient history because like that's where everything started and that
Yes.
like
Hmm.
in civilization, like the cradle of civilization. And
Yes.
so I think I was taking that when I was thinking of what Cygnus would look like, I was trying to think of those sort of like not old cities, but like ancient cities. Like if this is where this seed was taken, and
Hmm.
if this thing was so important that the city would grow around it, that is sort of like Cygnus is in this world, like that that cradle and that like so um vital like ancient city of where like all these things come as a crossroads. And so um you know so that's sort of where the design of the city and came from. And yeah, just sort of like, that sort of, you take that idea and then I sort of built out the world visually sort of based on some of those texts. I think, MK was very like, I think originally it was like post industrial was sort of some of the briefs are, and some, I think some of it's like a game of telephone a little bit too, where I get caught up on some of these other things and then some
Hmm.
of things get up out a little bit, but then it's like, is the core of what the story is. So, I think in your notes, you're like, oh, it's in this time century, it's in this place.
Yes.
But
Hmm.
really, I think it's kind of timeless
Yes.
right? And it's in a
Yeah.
place that doesn't necessarily exist. And I think that's sort of perfect for the story because it's about, we talk about resources dwindling, but it's not necessarily just crops, but as we're looking at like, oil being
Hmm.
gone eventually or things like, it's like, it's really, again, just like things don't end, right? Like MK said,
Yes.
they change.
Yes.
And so we're looking at it. This isn't it's not like an apocalyptic series. It's a change series, right? Where things are on the cusp of changing, which I think is very like incredibly topical and relevant
Hmm.
to everything that we've experienced, like we're experiencing now, you know.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of because John, I think the good thing about it is that it's adapting. That's that's the thing, you know, that because again, the original wishing seed and MK, please jump in. The original wish seed, it kind of sort of it was almost becoming extinct, and then you know um, they had to like cultivate it, and it's already on its almost it's they had to adapt it to something a little different. Now it's already going to be well, not phased out or slowly dying out. It's a crop that's dying out. Um, you know, um, MK, do you want to add anything to that?
Um, think, yeah, I really kind of just wanted to keep it like I think I wrote some rules of like I haven't totally figured out how it works, but I don't want it to look gross and like there's any technology going around
Yes.
or just um I I think I pulled up like um Star Trek episodes where they go to a planet and everybody's dressed in like
Yes.
in and everything, but then there's some secret tech somewhere behind the scenes that's powering everybody's household without like wood burning stoves or something. And it's like, we don't have to feel out every particular one, but it's just like behind the scenes somewhere and has gotten to a point where, there's no gross smokestacks or
Hmm.
uh I think vernacular architecture kind of like came up in the conversations a lot too, just of like making a place look like the way people have grown it for centuries.
Hmm. Yeah. Jonathan, I have to get back to you about your design, how you kept it like it's like and correct me if I'm wrong, the Mediterranean city. Because I love the island design and stuff. And I kept going, oh God, this looks so familiar. And I love, and it's not like I was trying and as a comic book reader, whenever I try to read like these fantasy comics, I try to get like some type of anchor point where it's like, okay, this is probably sometime in Europe or sometime just, and it's just for me. But again, the island design is great. I love it. It's just,
Thank you.
it's great.
Well, something I'll say too is, you asked if we had some sort of Bible, and I think
Yeah.
something that I love is that we kind of do and we also kind of don't. It's
Yeah.
very like organic in the way that like as we make each issue, we sort of, like I think some places might have like, okay, this is the like, you know, this is the story Bible. These are the things that we're gonna do. This
Hmm.
is how everybody, and I think I love that there's room for spontaneity and ideas to kind of
Yes.
come from sort of what we've made before. So I think that approach, we definitely don't have that approach. It's like sort of, I think, this first issue, I think we laid a foundation that we've built up on in the later issues, but it's very like, I think that's for me, that's very fun and very fresh about the project is like, we're kind of, again, we're building it collaboratively
Hmm.
and organically sort of like as we go. So I think that's a different approach than a lot of people might take to working on projects like this.
All right, well, thank you. Um, Jonathan, as you mentioned that this is an anthology series. MK, I'm going to start off with you regarding characters because in this first issue we meet I'm going to try to hopefully I pronounce her name correctly. Drea. We meet Jonas. Um, can I ask you, can you guys go over like who these characters are in this first issue, and then I'm gonna, will we see them later on in some of the other issues, or is it?
We definitely see Jonas later on because I just finished reading that one.
Okay.
Dre, I think, is coming back too. A little bit is we only have so many issues greenlit so far, so it depends a little bit on business negotiations after this is out. Um, but so far, there's one issue that doesn't have characters that are or doesn't have main characters that are set up in the first issue. But that comes in the middle, and you do see a couple of the characters again and again after they first show up.
Okay. Oh, that's pretty cool.
And
And
I
then
think it's fun. If it's okay, I think it's fun to read because I think MK has done a good job of like it's an anthology series, but it's not so like the stories like I love how the stories are woven together and so
yes.
that they don't feel like siloed in like each issue isn't it's its own thing, but there is also like a really like MK's done a wonderful job of sort of like weaving them together. And I think that like readers will enjoy the way that happens too as they read each issue as it comes out.
Okay. Oh, Jonathan, thank you very much. Um, what I love about this first issue, there's two scenes that I love that really stood out for me. Um, One is the conversation with the old wounded warrior. He's on the dock. The Eclipse is docked on the wooden, is docked over there, and the old wounded warrior who has lost his left leg, he's like fishing for dinner, and there's a young warrior that's trying to go, hey, someone stole something from us. Hey, have you seen, who stole it? Have you seen this person or whatever? The thing I love about this was one, the scene you guys gave it time to breathe. It was nice because it starts off with, hey, we're trying to look for someone and da 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 da, and then the young healthy soldier, the strapping young soldier, he's kind of like going, hey, they stole the wish seed, and hey, I bet you, man, if you had one of these, you probably would ask for your leg back, huh? It's almost kind of a little bit of, a little bit too much of a confidence thing, but the old wounded warrior says no. I wish I was like I wish I had your young body without the aches and pains. And I just love that scene because it almost kind of sounds like, and I can be wrong, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like it almost felt like the old warrior was fading into the sunset. Like it almost sounded like he was like, when he joined up, as a young man, he thought he was going to die in battle and, and for a cause, but now he's old. He's got aches and pains. You know, I I don't know. That was just a very touching and moving scene. And like I said, what was nice was you guys let that breathe a little bit. That was great. Do you guys want to comment on that or anything?
I'm just gonna say, Jonathan's really amazing at pacing and giving everything the space that it needs visually to play into that and add to it. And that's part of why I really love working with him, is he always makes my stuff better.
Hmm.
Um, and I will a lot of times I will write a page with like a few less panels and he'll just break it down a little bit extra to give each line the space that it needs, and
Hmm.
it's just really good at putting the emotion in behind it so that it
Oh,
lands right.
thanks, buddy. And I think, something I've appreciated about is I think it's really hard to write. I think it's always have a dream to be like, oh, I'd love to write a monthly series. But I think reading the script is like writing, like fitting things into a strict 24 pages when there's a lot of things is really hard. And like it's a different mindset, I think. And I don't know if you have to kind of, when you go into it, MK, if that's a challenge for you trying to write fit those things in those 24 pages. So I think, when we are able to sort of like have a moment like that where characters are able to, because you have to fit a lot in. So when characters can have those moments, and I think, I love that scene too, because I think as we're all old or older or getting older,
Mhm.
like you can look at young people who, whether they're, like that scene you mentioned, it's like, okay, it's about these two warriors, but I feel the same way, and maybe MK feels this too, when you talk to young cartoonists who are like, oh, I'm staying up, I'm not sleeping at all, and I'm
Mhm.
drawing this, and I'm sitting weird, and I'm just eating pizza all the time, and I can't even get out of a chair with something creaking.
Mhm.
And, I have to replace cauliflower with all the carbs that I love. And, so I think I really related to Bert because I was, just like, yeah, you're young, but you're stupid and you don't know how good you have it. I wish I could transport my body back into my 20-year-old self too. So that was, I don't know, like, that's the thing about art is we can all enjoy it for different reasons. But I think for me, like that scene felt relatable to me as just
Mhm.
an old person looking at young people sometimes, because I used to teach. I taught for about 10 years, and so I was always in a position where I was just like, you kids. So that's also, I think it's a, that juxtaposition of the old and the young. I think MK really, MK does characters really well. And I think
Yes.
what you're saying, Jason, I think is just like you're responding to those characters being written well in a small scene, and like extracting the most you can
Mhm.
from that small moment. And so I think that you just, you're picking up on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like I said, I love that scene. It was great. The other scene that I love was the conversation between. Now, all I saw was I didn't get her name, but it was the director who was trying to hold the like trying to make sure that everyone gets their fair share of the wish. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying it wrong. The wishing seed or the wish seed, right? Yeah. And then she's talking to Commander um oh Opfleck. I'm
Mhm.
pronouncing that wrong. But then the thing was, he goes and tells her, it's like, hey, someone stole our wish seed. I want another one. You got to give me another one. You know, um, and I love it where it's a nice little tense scene where the director's going, no, we only have so much. Let me explain what's going, and this is why. And she explains everything. This is why we can't give out. We can't give it out. We have to. Every nation is only allotted certain amount, and that's it. And I just love it where it's just a little tension over there, and then it's almost like it just feels like, because again, we've been in certain situations where it's relatable, where it's like, you're, it's, you're trying to uphold certain rules and so forth. Um, and there's someone that's going, no, you know, you have to do it because it's me. I need this, and we've seen those happenings happen to, all of us. And like I said, I could relate to that a little bit more. And that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to give any spoilers. But yeah, but MK, do you want to add anything, or Jonathan, do you want to add anything that what I spoke about in from that one scene?
I feel like it's really hard to do without doing spoilers. And if no,
Yeah, well, well, not to interrupt you, but like, I just feel like, I think what we can say is like, if only the real world had the magical protections,
Yes.
that, like, the conservatory has for people that try to step out of line and take what isn't theirs. So that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. Actually, what it is more consequences. It's like
Yes, exactly.
that's what it is. person's trying to warn, no, you can't do that. I'm going to do it, and poof. And the thing is, sometimes we just want to see that instant consequences right then and there, you know. But like I said, those are the two great scenes that I love. It was,
Thank you.
yes. All right. Um, Actually, MK, I'm going to start. I know we talked about, you talked about, how you came up with the story and so forth. Um, I just want to throw this out there. Um, was there anything else that kind of helped you inspire to write this story? Because you already had the groundwork while, you're, in the, and your friends are driving you in the car and stuff. But was there like any movies or any other stories that kind of that kind of inspired you to, like to flesh out the story?
Well, I'm a big fan of Ursula Le Guin and her science fiction. I think like the Left Hand of Darkness probably is one of them, but maybe also The Dispossessed, which is like an anarchist communist kind of utopia. But just kind of looking at her work and how she teases out like a whole system based around one idea of like what's a value in the society and what's not, is probably something that I probably pull from, and I probably could name some more books like that, but I feel like I maybe tend to read more dystopian sci there's just a lot more dystopian sci-fi out there, so
I think there's
that
a lot.
probably counters that. But also writing something in reaction to that, like I've seen a million zombie movies where
Mhm.
something ran out and now the world's destroyed, and the only thing that hasn't run out is bullets. Um, um, yeah, yeah, sometimes you eat pizza for like a really long time and you're like, I need some broccoli, like real bad. I think that's a little bit in there.
um, Jonathan, off the cuff question, because like you mentioned that you went to high school in the Middle East. When you were working on this story, you know, how much research did you do? Like, did you kind of like look at the architectural designs and you know?
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, obviously, I looked at a lot of, you know, like Persian design and stuff. I would say like it was not a lot of research. It's a lot of pulling images
Yes.
from a lot of places and then just pulling them up on a board. And so, we like I have one constant like viz dev file. And so before we start each issue, because it does jump around locations and there'll be new characters that show up. And so what I'll do is I'll go and I'll pull up a bunch of images of, you know, so I was looking at like Turkish architecture, Persian architecture, Mediterranean cities, especially because like Cygnus is this like has this big port, and
Hmm.
especially if it's like I just imagine that like so many things are coming through it because it's sort
Yes.
of again this sort of like this hub where the seat is, and I'll just start doing sketches, and then I'll post those sketches. MK's in Seattle. I'm here in Portland.
Hmm.
Our colorist Ali is here in Portland, but we do everything over, like we do all our communication over Discord. And I think like a plus side of, I mean, MK and I have always kind of worked like that, but I think a plus side of all the horrors that we've gone through the last couple of years is that with COVID is that I think it makes remote communication a lot more normalized and like could like
Hmm.
easier. And so
Hmm.
like having like we have a Discord server that like I'll be like, okay, new characters, here's some sketches. And like sometimes they'll be maybe a little bit different like from what maybe MK put down, and sometimes they'll be like, oh, that looks great, but then sometimes they'll be like, oh, this like don't forget this is important,
Hmm.
um that it'll come up in the story later, so we might need to change this on them. And, and so again, it's like so that's sort of like the intro to every chapter. And so I won't say like I do a lot of research, but I definitely, again, the focus is like, how can we make this like yet less Eurocentric?
Yes.
But how can we make the world feel believable and lived in? And so, it's interesting because I actually got to have dinner with our colors yesterday, like a long overdue dinner to check in. And, so we were talking like a lot of shop, and something I realized, is like MK was like, oh, this Star Trek inspiration. And I think I definitely took that. And, I think one of the briefs, and it's something I think is a lot of fun when you work with MK, is like the way that they write the briefs is also fun and interesting. So just having it, because it's short, but it also has a lot of like, it gives you a lot of information. So being like, inspiration is Star Trek. Think it's filmed in like Napa Valley, where they removed the bougie wine signs and the like learn, live, love. And so like that was also an inspiration. So it was like that push to like, so the like the buildings and stuff were kind of inspired by that. But I think something I'm also like, oh, I sort of ran with that, and it made me think of other 90s TV shows. But I think what I was able to articulate last night with our conversation with Ali was like, what I took from that was also something I love about those 90s TV shows is that they might not have the most resources, and the world that they build is not, it doesn't, like, the logic works for the show. So like we're doing a Buffy rewatch right now, and like I think something I'm really taking in on like my 11th rewatch is like the craft of the writing and how tight the characters are, but also how like okay, that library is not how a library works. but that library works. That library has everything that show that story needs for it, and the logic works there. And so just to say that like that when I say like, oh, I was inspired, like I took MK's sort of like 90s Star Trek The Next Generation, and then I kind of took that, but I also was like, oh, I think something is like nothing, it doesn't like sometimes I'll do a design thing and I'm like, this doesn't actually make sense because like this isn't how a house would be set up, or this isn't how a city might be set up, because the market would actually be closer to the docks, and I can get so caught up in the weeds about that. But being like, okay, does this work for the world that we built? Is the information in this scene that MKs have set up? And so like that, I think informs, I can't even remember what the question was, but, in terms of research. But so I think getting that balance of like overthinking it and just being like, does this have all the information that it needs in terms of character story? Like, what is MK trying to say in the story, in their story? And how am I bringing the light is the core of what is coming out in that story, and not getting caught. Because I think it's really easy to get into, not that I'm like blowing off research, but I think sometimes for me, I can get really in the weeds about like the logic of a world and a story. And like people, like someone's going to read it and they're not going to worry about like what the economy is like, or what the, like as long as it makes sense in the world that we're telling. And so I have to balance like what MK is writing and how I'm bringing it to life in a way that works, but also isn't like over complicated, right? Because it's also a 24-page, like we have a finite amount of pages to tell a story and to get caught up in some of this stuff.
Yeah, we're not writing the story about like the other students at that school who have to go to that library and research like the Civil War and have nothing to look at. That's just not there.
Yeah.
No, but Jonathan, thank you, because what basically, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what it is that you're trying to find that perfect balance where, yes, I need to look at some visual, because you are doing some research, but you're kind of going, okay, I don't need to get this technical, because if I get this technical, is the reader really going to see that? But as long as it looks, the architect designs, the clothing, if it at least you try to make it believable in that world, because
but the thing is too is like we're also, there's a lot of detail that someone might miss that we put in there that, again, I think those are the things that ground it. So how is it generic, but how do we make it grounded? And like, I think especially like like I might put details in things because I'm like, oh, this is how this, or even like MK might write something and it might not come up in the story, but like we're like, oh, this is how this thing works, or this is a person's detail. And I think what I love too is that our colorist also thinks in terms of like, how is color a story?
Mhm.
And nobody's gonna know any of
Yeah.
these things, but that helps frame her to be like, these person, like the color that this person wears is because of X, Y, and Z. And so like,
Yeah.
it is grounded. And I think that, in terms of research, I'm also like, it's the fantasy story. So we're getting to make up the world how we want it. It'd be different if this was like, oh, this is set in, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like Shanghai in the 1800s. Then I would really make sure, like I would get in the weeds about like,
Yes.
what does housing look like? What are the clothing look like? How are people, you know what I mean? Like that's where the research kicks in. But I think things can be a little research light because it's like, well, we get to make, and I think I forget that often that like we are making the rules of what the world is. And so
Mhm.
like it takes some pressure off. But again, like, but you still want it to feel, when someone reads it, are they like, this is like the city of Cygnus, or are they just like, this is Napa Valley with those live, laugh, love signs taken off? And so, that's I think for me the goal is when I think if we do our job right, everyone just reads it and has fun.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah.
but it's the minute that something is wrong, that
Oh,
like
yes.
where someone's like, that building looks weirder. Why are those person's clothes like that? Or why, you know what I mean? I think that's when you've kind of failed to build a cohesive world, is when you haven't made like it's not cohesive enough that people get pulled out of the story.
Oh no, yes, no, but
Really, I feel like I also should call out Allie in this because her detail on some stuff goes to like we were talking about a change in characters' clothes from the beginning to the end, and I think I just made like an offhand comment like, well, he kind of really wants to stay the same, so like maybe just the buttons are different. And then it is the smallest detail, and I don't even think if you're reading it on your phone or anything,
yeah,
unless
it's
you
like
do it all the way up, you would even notice that like there's a little change in the buttons on that part and that issue. And it's
Yeah, the
later on, it's
color.
not the first one, but like Allie just really thinks things through on just such a tiny detail level of things. It's really kind of amazing. And we'll just bring up stuff and I'm like, well, I hadn't thought about that before, but now this is all I'm gonna think about until we resolve it. So I think it would work like this. Um, but also, she's also just willing to be like, well, I think it would work like this because of this and this. I'm like, that sounds perfect. Let's go with that because you already did it.
but it's what I love, just you know from the both of you just talking about it, is that because it's you guys created this world, and the world that you guys are literally in some senses that you guys are living in this world for now. And it's great because like it's like someone's, and I'm gonna say, and I'll be honest, because if I read the story I would miss the button thing,
Mhm.
you know but for Allie, for you guys, it's real, it's a grounded for you guys. And it shows that you guys have love. And I know, and don't get me wrong, I know when writers and artists, when they create comics, they put their heart and soul into this. And it also shows for you guys to talk about it, is that you guys put your heart and soul into this. The dialogue, you know going back to, let's say, going back to the old warrior and the young warrior, the dialogue in that. And then Jonathan, how you pace it, you let it breathe a little bit more, which is great. And then for Ali to probably to show the different colors, or what I love, the scene with the commander and the director. The color of their clothing is so different. It's very. I love the director's the outfit, because I remember it's blue, if I remember correctly. It's
Mhm.
very nice. You know, um, we're slowly. winding down. Let me start wrapping up some questions. Let me just ask a couple more questions. Jonathan, I'm going to start off with you. Then I'm going to ask MK. What is the most fun or exciting thing that you love working on this series? I think you've already mentioned it's an anthology, but
Yeah, but well, no, I mean, I think if in any of these interviews that we do, I think the thing that I want to get across is how much fun and how much joy it is to be working with MK and Allie, and it's actually making me like tear up a little bit as I answer this because it's like that's not always the case. Like especially in comic, like I think like this, I just want to like this is really a collaboration. Like I hope that's come across in this, and that like I feel like MK will make something, and then I'll riff on it, and then we'll riff on it, and like and then Ali will riff on it, and again like we're seeing like as we make it, we're seeing a world develop in real time
mm-hmm.
to tell this story, and like there we also have a creative freedom here in this project that we might not have in some other projects, and so like
Yes.
that's like in a time when it's like life is really hard, um coming together and make something that we like we're getting paid to make a thing that we might have made 10 years ago as a zine that we'd put on ourselves and not get paid for. Like that
Yes.
is really like that's something really really beautiful, and that's any interview, that's all I want anybody to get is that it's really fun to make things with your friends, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like and really really share it together, you know what I mean, and it's MK, it's not like they just do the writing, I just do the art, and it's like a
Mm-hmm.
factory system. Like it really is like us back and forth.
Yeah, I came up with the idea a long time ago, and it really wasn't until last year that Jonathan had the opening in his schedule, because he was finishing up Lizard Boy 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of hit him up like probably around this time last year, and I was just like, hey, I have this thing and I have a budget for it. And like, if you want to come do it, it would be really fun to work with you again. Um, and, like Jonathan can do everything on his own. He doesn't need me to write something for him, but it's great when we get to work with each other because, like, we probably started actively working on it in the summer, and we've gotten to talk, like, at least on a weekly basis, if not daily, in all
Mm-hmm.
that time, and just having that back and forth with someone to just like make something that we both care about and are bringing ideas to, and just seeing that back and forth every day has just it has made me so much more happy to be able to do that, even though like we used to both be in Portland and we'd see each other now and again, but like
Mm-hmm.
we talk to each other more than probably we ever did
Yeah,
the whole time we
yeah.
lived there. Even though like we did work on another book in that time, it
Mm-hmm.
was just such a different process for it that it didn't feel like this one does, and it's really special to get to do that again because it is like it was when we first did Americus, even though it's like a much more compressed time frame because we're not both working at bookstores in our free time to
Mm-hmm.
support doing this. And it's really been so different from a lot of the other working situations that I've had for the past couple of years. Just that's really the best part of it. It's just like getting to do something with your friend that turns out cool, and like you're both have like progressed enough to know what you're doing at this point. It's really great.
Oh, thank you very much. Two more questions. Actually, three more questions. Jonathan, I'm gonna start off with you. What is your next store or convention appearance for this year?
I'm gonna be honest. I hate going to conventions.
That's fine.
I can't stand sitting at a table for 5 days, however long convention. So I don't have anything. I think I might be at Rose City, um, probably this and Lizard Boy. I mean, I like going to book festivals a little bit more, but like I feel like that's something that's been tough about I think Budding Crisis and having it be a digital release is that we
Yes.
can't we can't really go and share it with people, but
Mhm.
hopefully we think that there is
Mhm.
going to be a print collection when it's
Mhm.
Oh
done.
yes,
We
yeah.
found, yeah. So I think when that's the case, we'll probably go out and do things more, because I think there is something really special though about being in, you know, in public and meeting readers and talking to them and stuff. So right now and also like, yeah, I don't have any, I think I might be at Rose City this fall. Um,
MK.
I'll be at Emerald City at the end of next month because I don't have
that's
to
next
travel
month.
very far for it, and that's my criteria for shows these days.
All right. Last question. Actually, MK, I'm going to start off with you. Any closing words to our listeners?
It's available on Comixology. You can probably find a link in the video. I really hope people enjoy it and like it, and it's uh, I do feel like it's some of the best work that we've ever done together. So I'm really happy in how it's turning out.
Jonathan?
You know, so like I'm a pretty comics purist, in terms of like, oh, I want it in print, I want it on hand,
Yes.
but like, or even like, and I'll read stuff on my tablet. But something I'll say is like, I gotta give credit, the guided view on Comixology actually is like pretty cool. Like, as someone
Mhm.
who like is like, that's dumb, like that actually works, because like my storytelling is set so that it's all set up on a grid. And a
Mhm.
lot of people like, that's so boring, Jonathan. But it's like, there's lots of reasons why I do that. But like, we were looking the other day and we were like, it actually is pretty cool. So like, even if you're a comics purist like me, like, and you're reading it on Comixology, like, or on the Amazon Reader, Kindle Reader, whatever, like, give Guided View a try, because I think we were all kind of impressed with how well it works. So like, that's my weird backhanded like plug, that is kind of being like biting the hand that feeds us sort of thing. But like, it like, if you weren't interested in doing Guided View, try it here, because it actually looks pretty sick.
Mhm.
And
Um,
read it.
To also in that vein, if you go and look on the Comixology store, you might notice some people's covers are like really readable at a tiny size.
All right. MK, Jonathan, mahalo. Thank you in Hawaiian. Thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to interview the two of you. And I want to say thank you very much for making comics. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish you all the I wish the both of you all the success with Budding Crisis. Um, I want to thank Dustin of Superfan Promotion for setting up this interview and again providing me with an advanced reading copy. If you are a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader I'm, who loves adventure stories, um, this is it's a very thought provoking um, story. I read the first issue. Like I said, I love it. I really do. Please check out Budding Crisis from Comixology Unlimited. As Jonathan and MK has mentioned, that this is an anthology series. So I'm gonna check out the other issues when it comes out. Again, the first issue is available right now. Issue 2 comes out on February 18th. And also, to listeners, please check out Jonathan's book, Lizard Boy 2, The Most Perfect Summer Ever. That's going to come out on April 8th. It's the sequel to the Tales of the Seventh Grade Lizard Boy. I want to thank Drew, the Close of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listener. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
Aloha, and thank you, Jason, for having us. So
Yeah,
much
thanks, Jason.
fun talking to you. Yeah.
The good folks at Comics for Fun and Profit have been doing 2 episodes a week for quite some time now, and it's all thanks to, first of all, Jason, and second of all, our patrons who allow us to add the space on our server broadcast more, store more, share more with you, the listeners. I'm envious of those of you who have unlimited storage and media server capabilities. We pay for ours here at the C4FAP. It ain't cheap. We thank you so much for those of you who go to patreon.com/comicsfunprofit and contribute at any level to say thanks, to say, I want to be a part of your Slack channel conversations. I want to get exclusives. I want to get early access. I want to get ad-free access. I want to get swag. I want to get some free stuff. Whatever your reasoning is, we appreciate it at any level because it does make a difference. So from the bottom of Kyle and I and Jason's heart, thank you for contributing.